the Iraq War, you're making protest songs. You're connecting that to 9/11 and what went on, and you had been skeptical of it from the moment you saw them posting Osama bin Laden. I don't know why. I had already begun to question the news beforehand due to Columbine and the way they handled it. But when 9/11 happened, maybe it was my proximity to the city and knowing people there, like the fear got to me. I was in like 9th grade and I was just like, yeah, of course, this is just all, I bought into the narrative. It wasn't until later when I was like, oh, none of this makes sense. And then with the video you posted that I'd like you to talk about, and then talking about making connections to things. Can you break down the Crowley influence that you're talking about when it comes to the Bushes, to 9/11, all that stuff?
So I started getting into this whole numerology stuff. This is kind of a separate thing, but my grandmother, she was really involved in the alien research scene. And so I met a lot of the early UFO pioneers 20 years ago when I was kind of a kid. And then where she lives, she still lives. She just turned 90 this year.
Oh, sick.
I know. Yeah. So she's out in Rhode Island, and where she lived, she had to sell the house that she was in, where she had all these UFO conventions, where I met some very interesting people and had some very interesting experiences.
Well, she was a part of like a society, like just a private thing where they were investigating UFO stuff.
So it was basically all the top researchers would get together she had a fancy mansion, and they would get really drunk for about a week, 2 weekends sometimes. She'd swim in her pool and talk about everything, and they would do hypnotic regressions on each other. It was weird, man. I was a skeptic.
So this is making a little more sense now with everything.
I was soaking it all in.
That's amazing.
So nearby there was the oldest public library in the country there.
Oh, wow.
Also nearby was an actual Templar round castle. I'm talking about the round stone structures that are scattered around, right? So it's a pre-Columbian. It's one of the things that it's cited, and it's on Wikipedia, even whatever. But as one of these things, it was here when we showed up, but it was made, and there's theories it was Chinese people before Columbus. There's theory it was Vikings before Columbus. No, this was a Templar thing or whatever. It was a sound technology, right? So that's what we're talking about with these ancient. I mean, I'm not going full Tartaria on you or anything, but
you're allowed to.
Whatever this was like a technology that was generating power or whatnot. So that thing is right there, and it's right next to the oldest library in the country. So I used to go in there, and because of my family, I had access to. I could go in and see their archives, and I just looking through books in 1600s, 1700s, and they let me take some of them out too. And so I really started doing a deep dive into all that stuff. Started reading about esoteric physics. Joseph Farrell writes about the Giza pyramids as being essentially weapons, or power stations, which is that one
kind of like Tesla,
Christopher. I can't remember what his name is. Anyway, so I was getting into that stuff, but then I started looking into the numerology aspect of things, and also researching DMT and these other. There was a whole nother discussion and category, but it was around 2010, 2011 when I started really getting into the numerology stuff. And then when the event in Connecticut in the end of 2012, which gets a lot of people in trouble for talking about, when that was about to happen, I started talking about it before it happened, and I made some predictions, and they kind of came true.
Really?
And
like what? What were you saying?
With the Boston thing.
Can you say
what kind of numerological events that were done on certain days to get a certain, I don't know. Look, it's tough when you start talking about this because a lot of people just shut down and they're like, oh, I don't believe in this. I don't believe this. It doesn't really matter if you don't believe in it. They do. And even some of them don't really, it's kind of a game to them, but some of them take this stuff really seriously.
Can you say what you were looking at pattern wise that made you have a prediction before Sandy Hook or before the Boston Marathon?
Well, certainly all the hubbub about the to-do about the Mayan thing. Which was literally that month.
Was it really?
Yes. That was a week before the world was supposed to end. Right.
Oh, wow. Yeah. And we were all hyped up on that.
There's going to be because there's another book that I read who talked about the 9/11 and the Crowley stuff. There's actually a few books that are on that, and they were talking about a December event around Christmas. And I said, well, since 11 is their number that they use all the time, it's probably going to be 11 days before Christmas. So it happened December 14th, which was 11 days before Christmas. So I was expecting an event on that day, and it was going to be a massive ritual.
Oh, wow.
So that's another thing. And then the Boston bombing, that was right when their favorite time of sacrifice by fire. It's usually April 19th or April 20th. So you were talking about Columbine. That's an example of it. Look, Bill Cooper warned about all this stuff, about that they were going to be doing these ritual school shootings, and it was all going to be about Second Amendment, but also this is a psychological warfare type thing where they create these events that are aspects of them are real. Some of them have real deaths, and some of them have real carnage and real things associated with it. And some of them are completely fabricated. And then we're all arguing with each other about, oh, this is all fake, this is all real. And then they just move on and stage the next one, right? Yeah. So with the Boston thing, it was, that was that time starting around April 15th is the sacrifice by fire, and it's the Beltane Walpurgis festival. It goes back to all these traditions, and it ends May 1st. And May 1st is the sacrifice of the straw man. So that's when they killed Hitler on May 1st, and that's when they killed Osama bin Laden also. Right. So they do these rituals on these specific days as it's like the burning of the straw man, but it's not. These are staged events essentially.
When you say they, who are you referring to? Crowley here?
I shouldn't have even said that.
Well, I have to ask.
The movers and shakers. I don't know. The people that have been around for like they're really inbred.
Ancient families.
There's a bunch of secrets. I hate the people that are just, oh, it's the Jesuits, oh, it's the Jews, oh, it's this and that.
Right.
And it's like, yes, it is all these things, but it's not though. It's that's
how I feel.
You know what I'm saying? Like
the evil transcends. The evil transcends. You can't just pinpoint one thing. It's like trying to look at any of these events that you're talking about through a singular lens, because there's so many freaking layers to it.
It's the Freemasons that are behind. It's like, okay, yeah, sure.
It's all of it.
Yeah, the Freemasons.
I think it's all of it, and there's competing factions of evil as well. And I should point out real quick, when I reached out to you about doing the show today, I didn't realize until I went back and looked at our messages that the first thing you said was, "Oh, the 11th, that's good." So you're already, because it's August 11th, right?
It's also episode 13.
It's also episode 13.
Oh wow! The 11th. Well, I noticed that too. That was on the 11th. I was like, yeah. So, do you want to talk 9/11?
Let's do it. Yeah. So, because there's so many interesting things you're talking about in your video about connections, like what we're saying with May 1st and all these dates. So yeah, let's go into it. You can start with wherever, Crowley or whomever. There's a lot of characters.
Well, so Crowley, or Crowley. I mean,
I never know.
I think you were talking with Owen Benjamin recently, and he said something about Jack Parsons too. Yeah. So all these guys were occultists, right? So Jack Parsons did the jet propulsion. He was the main founder of the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. In fact, they called it the JP Laboratory. It's kind of a joke. JP Jack Parsons. So he was a major occultist. He was a Crowleyan occultist. When I say occultist, whatever, they did ritual sex magic. They were obsessed with Sirius, which is a whole nother can of worms.
Yeah, we're gonna put that on the shelf for the end of the
there. No pun intended.
Yeah.
So Crowley was this. He was gonna be the prophet of the new eon or whatever. Yep. Freak of nature. They're all freaks. They probably had some interesting ideas, and they probably were tapping into some real stuff, but it corrupts them, and so I tend to try to avoid saying, oh, this is a Crowley thing, this is this thing, because it's like, yeah, sure, but they're all those elements. I'm a pattern guy, right? So what I say, I study words, right? I love to see patterns. I do anagrams, and I like to collect data points. I collect I oversaturate myself, but I'm really good at discerning, right? A real schizo, like I'm a high functioning schizo. A low functioning schizo, they don't know what to do with all that, right? I can sort of say, get rid of this, extraneous. Yep. And same thing when I'm reading piano music, right? So one of my strong points, not as good learning stuff by ear. I'm envious of those who can. But if you put a sheet of music in front of me, I will play it for you almost perfectly, unless it's something insane Chopin or Liszt. But for the most part, I'm at the top of my field when it comes to that. So a lot of it is getting rid of, noticing the patterns and then sifting through, right? So when you start saying, oh, on 9/11, the first plane to hit the tower was Flight 11.
Right.
And then people are like, okay, so it's tough and then you hit them with a second plan, a third thing. And after a certain while, people just shut themselves down. Whereas I'm coming from a place where I have looked at the whole thing, and I've seen this coincidence. And I mean, just a recent event, which is crazy how it's been memory hold so much, is the Butler, Pennsylvania thing, right? That was literally a month ago.
Crazy.
And it feels like ancient history now, but it's one of those things where I was talking to a normie family member. I'm like, isn't it weird that this happened? And isn't it weird that this happened? Like, it's quite a coincidence. It's you give them 100 coincidences and they stop listening at about number 20. But I'm like, no. The odds of every one of these happening, I'm sorry, this world doesn't work that way. I mean, maybe it does. But so with the 9/11 thing, there's so many things where, and it's tough too because you get with people are, you get the thermite crowd, and then you get the bombs, and you get the no planes
hologram planes.
Stuff is just infighting, right? And they all have elements of truth and there, but they do this. Look, 9/11 had multiple layers. There was basically 3. There was the low-level terrorist guys, the Muslim guys, right? You can say that whatever, they were on a plane or whatnot. And then there was the second level, which was like the Cheney types who were arranging things. And you can say, oh, the Mossad or whatever, sure. And a lot of people say, oh, they did it or this group did it. Well, sure, they were at the next level because there was all these things that had to be done about the plane, the thing. They were running a bunch of tests or stuff that day. They were doing a bunch of things that distracted them, right? All these things have to be coordinated at a very high government level. But then you also have a third level, and or the top level, I would call it the first level, and they are the high magic occult priests. And you could say that they are part of what I would refer to and others refer to as the breakaway civilization. I'm sure you've heard that term before. So that is a tricky term, and it can mean a lot of different things. Basically, there is a different financial system. And I'm actually going to do a thread on this soon, redoing some old work I did on this of the bearer bonds scandal. Do you know what I mean when I say bearer bonds?
No.
Well, so about 10 years ago or so, even a little longer now, there was this weird series of events where in Italy, these guys were trying to go through the airport and they found these bonds. They're called bearer bonds going back to the 1930s, 40s, US issued bonds for insane amounts of money that should not exist, right? We're talking millions, but back then billions, right? So these bonds and what was interesting about them is that many of them had weird typos that shouldn't have been. So they're like, oh, these are fake. So all these stories they went and everyone was freaking out and they kind of disappeared. But what we're actually dealing with here is an entirely different financial system. And first of all, you don't fake something that couldn't possibly exist, right? If you fake something, you fake a $20 bill or a $100 bill. You don't fake a $20 trillion bill, right?
What did the people say when they were caught? What was their story?
Well, I'm going to have to do. I'm going to do a whole thing on this, and I'll have to come back and talk about it. Yeah. It was dismissed as some loony thing, and then there was a weird thing about how those guys disappeared and they were released, and it wasn't just them. This has it happened in Korea. It's happened. This is connected with Japanese, the Philippine gold that was stolen by it's like Yamashito's gold or something. Basically during World War II was a massive looting of an old financial system, and to fund a breakaway civilization with separate technology. I mean, they were looking at the anti-gravity tech, the electrogravitics, all through the 30s, 40s, and 50s. It all went dark. It all went black, and we split. And so we basically have had this breakaway civilization ever since that is operating on a different financial. So I have been curious, wondering over all these years about, and try not to get too, because it's just hard to know these things physically, where are they? Are they on the moon? Are they on Mars? Are they in a space station? Are they in the hollow earth? Are they wherever? So that has been something I've been wrestling with, and I think I've got it.
Where do you think? Where do you think they are? Are they beyond the ice wall?
Yeah, they're on the bigger Earth.
Like I think he was in your video where Admiral Byrd was talking about there's a great untapped place to explore.
Yeah, but that's a whole different thing.
Yeah, so, I want to come back to that because I want to talk about Crater Earth in a little while. But so you're connecting this breakaway civilization stuff and this like money grab thing. I think maybe one or two of the layers of what you're talking about are what possibly happened with the money in the towers, and I think it was something about the Soviet Union or the Russian money that they were trying to take. I believe that's some project with the Bushes and Cheney.
Project Hammer.
Project Hammer. Right. So
yeah,
like
so there
that
was
is
a looting
stuff
of the Soviet preserve, their whole thing that happened. That the whole ending, the whole fall of that was so sketchy. They were all sort of involved in that, and they looted it for sure. And a lot of that had to do with the financial stuff that went on 9/11 and all that stuff was stored in there. But this is such a big, there were so many.
That's the thing.
This had been planned for so long.
And I want to,
since the tower was built.
Right. So let's start there. And like, let's jump to the Pentagon and then come back to the towers, because the things that you were laying out, which I think I really want people to hear about, if they don't already know, is about when was the ground broke for the Pentagon?
Wasn't it in 70 or
it was
77?
It was 9/11 for the Pentagon.
It was on 9/11.
It was on 9/11.
All these, there's so many of these dates that are
1941.
Well, so the big one, let's just start.
Yeah.
Also, so that's big, right? The 9/11 one was, but George Bush Sr. gave that New World Order speech that everyone likes to quote on 9/11, 11 years. So on September 11th, 1990, he says, we need a new world order. What's happening? They're looting the Soviet reserves as he's giving that speech, basically.
Right.
And, he's probably knows that he's going to be passing it on to Clinton, who is part of the whole system as well. So 11 years to the day before 9/11 happens, he says that infamous phrase, New World Order. And all, there's so many 9/11, September 11th, and all that stuff. And
I want to go.
The number 77 is a big one too.
That's where I was going to go next. But before we go to 77 and more Crowley stuff, this is probably where there's an amount of the audience that are like, well, these two guys are just totally schizophrenic, and these are just coincidences. What would be your argument against that? Because you and I both recognize a lot of patterns, I believe. So is it just that we're noticing coincidences, or why do you think there's something larger to that?
It's how they. It's not necessarily the event itself or how the event happened. Actually, it's what the narrative builds up over the years, if that makes sense, right? So the whole thing about how I was saying, was it actually those American Airlines flights? Was it a drone plane? Was there actually no plane? Sure, those are important because we need to know what happened that day. But in terms of the ritual, it's the numbers that they are associated with and they put in our face. So 93 it was put in our face again and again. 93, that movie, Flight 93, that was the plane that went down in Shanksville, right? The one where they fought back or whatever, which doesn't seem to have actually happened that way. 93 is the number of Crowley. It's his number. It's what they use to greet each other. It's his religion, Thelema. It's the numerical version of that, and it's the numerical version of love. It's all these things. So 93, if you see a 93 when it comes to a ritual or types of these events, and they say that again and again, then you know that that you have to at least pay attention to what this is. So Flight 93 was one of the 4 flights, but what is particularly interesting is Flight 11. So 11 is the magical number. 11 in Crowleyan magic is basically we're doing a ritual. It is the number of magic itself. Okay, so when you see 11 happening, you know that you're dealing with a ritual. So 9/11, they need to make sure. Why don't they call it that? September 11. Why they picked that for a reason. This is a ritual. These are ritual numbers. It's an incantation. So the first flight, Flight 11, hit floor 93. Now these are all you can verify all this stuff, and they put it in the thing. Say, floor 93, 1193. Automatically, you see the 11 with the 93. So the next flight hit floor 77, and the next flight, 175, I believe, is a ritual that Crowley did about you when you invoke a deity. And at the time that the second plane was hit, because that's the second one, which hit floor 77. So the first flight hit floor 93. The second flight hit floor 77. The third and fourth flights were flight 77 and flight 93. So already the same two floors are then the next two flights. You're already like, that's pretty wild.
Yep.
So as the floor 77 is hit using the invoke a deity ritual, George W. Bush was reading the pet goat book, which is the goat, right? That's the deity that he was invoking. And you had their regime photographers that were in there for that moment to capture this very iconic ritual that was being done in front of these school children. This was a staged event, photo op, to happen during 9/11 as that second tower was hitting, as he was reading about the goat, right? They like to put the symbology in our faces. So the guy, well, there was two photographers that are well known, but one of them, his name is Doug Mills.
That's right.
And Mills just happened to be on his first Trump rally working for the New York Times. He'd photographed Trump many times, but he was there and he was put into position, and he turned his camera to the 1/8,000th frames per second and also more settings, which I'm not, but I looked at them all. I'm like, this is wild. So he was put there to capture Trump's head being ritually blown up on.
That's right.
Blown from the world. So I strongly believe that, and I'm the first person to say fake about a lot of things, but that was something where I knew right away that we know that was real because they've memory holed it, right?
Yeah.
So this was something, if it went the way that they wanted, we wouldn't have heard the end of it.
We never hear the end of Sandy Hook. We never hear the end of, you name the event. And if they want it, if they can use it to help push whatever narrative they're pushing, it will be inundated with it.